Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to try and make sense of a really chaotic month, January 2026. We're looking at news reports from the time to understand a series of events that honestly shook the system, both here at home and around the world. So, the month kicks off with something straight out of a movie, a major military intervention on the world stage. We're talking about a raid, totally unprecedented, where a sitting head of state gets abducted and flown to the US. And while that's happening, things were exploding right here at home. Conflict just erupted on the streets of American cities. You had federal agents clashing with local communities, and, well, it led to some truly tragic and fatal consequences. And if that wasn't enough, all of this was happening while threats were being made against some of our closest allies. I mean, relationships that have stood for decades were being pushed to the absolute breaking point. Okay, so let's dive in and start by unpacking what was happening on the world stage.
Right. So to really get a grip on what's going on, we have to start with the foreign policy side of things. What we see is a picture of a really aggressive, really unpredictable approach. And there's no better place to start than with the most dramatic event of all, that raid in Venezuela.
I mean, this whole operation was just fast and totally stunning. According to reports from Democracy Now!, it all started with missile strikes on the capital, Caracas. Then, within hours, U.S. Special Forces had President Maduro and his wife. And get this, just 2 days later, he's standing in a Manhattan courtroom. This wasn't just some political power play. It was a full-on military operation, and it had immediate economic consequences, too, with the U.S. starting to seize Venezuelan oil tankers right after. But here's the thing, the Venezuela raid wasn't happening in a vacuum. It wasn't some isolated incident. When you start mapping out all the actions from that time, a really clear pattern emerges. At the exact same time, you have these massive tariffs being threatened against European allies to try and force the sale of Greenland, all justified as national security. And then you have threats of military force against Iran, supposedly to support protesters. So you've got 3 different parts of the world, 3 really aggressive actions, all unfolding at the same time. So how did the rest of the world react? Well, pretty much with shock and condemnation across the board. The UN Security Council scrambled to hold an emergency session. And it wasn't just adversaries. Allies, too, were calling the Venezuela attack a flat-out violation of international law. The UN Secretary General himself warned this set a dangerous precedent. And then with Greenland, the Danish Prime Minister, a NATO ally, put it in the starkest terms possible. He said a military move on Greenland would spell the end of NATO. Wow. But this aggressive style wasn't just for foreign policy. It was being mirrored right here at home. And the flashpoint, the place where it all blew up, was Minneapolis. Federal actions there just lit a match, sparking this huge firestorm of protest and a major standoff with local leaders. So here's how it started. 2,000 ICE agents were sent into the city. The official reason? To investigate fraud. But whatever the reason, tensions just shot through the roof, immediately. It led to violent clashes, and then a really tragic incident that got caught on video. That video sparked protests across the whole country, with everyone demanding accountability. This was the official story for why an ICE agent fatally shot Renee Good, a 37-year-old mother of 3. The Department of Homeland Security came out right away and framed it as an act of domestic terrorism. They claimed she was using her car as a weapon, and the agent fired in self-defense. But the local officials who actually saw the video, they told a completely different story. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, didn't mince words. He called the federal story bull and demanded that the agents get out of his city. So right there, you have this direct contradiction that just set the stage for a huge showdown between the city and the federal government. And from there, things just escalated like crazy. The federal government's response to the local pushback was to threaten to invoke the Insurrection Act. They blocked the state from even investigating the shooting and started their own investigations into the local leaders. What did the city do? It erupted. Mass protests, a general strike. The governor even started prepping the National Guard. It was literally a government at war with itself. Okay, so these aggressive moves, both overseas and at home, they weren't just political theater. They had real, immediate, and pretty severe economic consequences. And you can see that most clearly in the fight over Greenland, which was threatening to become a full-blown trade war with some of America's closest allies.
So, what was the threat exactly? It was a 10% tariff, which was set to jump to 25% on all sorts of goods from Denmark and 7 other European nations. And the condition was they had to agree to sell Greenland. I mean, this was a totally unprecedented move, and it put the US on a direct collision course with its biggest trading partners, which, of course, raised a huge question.
How would Europe respond? Well, European leaders basically said, we will not be blackmailed, and they started looking at a financial weapon that had never been used before. The official name is the Anti-Coercion Instrument, or ACI, but everyone calls it by its nickname, the Economic Bazooka, and it was literally designed for this exact situation, to fight back against economic bullying by completely cutting a country's companies off from European markets.
And let's be clear, this wasn't just some diplomatic tiff. The economic stakes were huge. A real trade war would mean you and I are paying higher prices for everything from medicine to car parts. U.S. companies, they get about half their money from outside the U.S., and they could have been totally choked off. One analyst called this level of uncertainty pure kryptonite for investors. So when you take a step back and look at the whole picture, you start to see it. These three crises, the military action abroad, the conflict in our cities, and this looming economic war, they aren't separate stories. They're all deeply connected. And together, they were putting a level of stress on the entire system that we just haven't seen in modern history. What all the reports from that month really show is a system being squeezed from every possible direction. You had military actions abroad that were shredding historic alliances. You had federal agents at home basically destroying domestic peace and pitting governments against each other. And all the while, these trade war threats were chipping away at the very economic stability that everything else rests on. So, that's the picture we can piece together from the news reports of January 2026. It's a snapshot of a country right on the edge, juggling multiple, massive crises all at the same time. And it really leaves you with this powerful, kind of unsettling question. Just how resilient are our institutions? What happens when every part of the system is tested all at once?